how do you feel about the squad which has been selected for the European Championships coming up in a couple of weeks' time?
I haven't really looked at it in fine detail. The only sort of standout one to me that Pete Reed wasn't in the four, and is in the eight. So I think the four is ranked as the top boat for the Europeans. I've got a feeling that they may all go back into an eight for the World Championships this year, but the long-term goal is the British number one's Ben's boat will be a four at Rio. I think the reasoning for Pete hasn't performed quite so well is that there's this rumour going around that he's allergic to his family dog, and he's been struggling with breathing issues. And but then, even if you're in the second British boat nowadays, that's not a bad thing. In my day, if you weren't in the top boat, if you were in the top boat, you had a great chance of winning a medal. And if you weren't in the top boat, you didn't have a very good chance of winning a medal. But now that almost any boat, men's, women's, lightweights, is that you've got a chance of medals because they're so strong.
Yeah, great, thank you. And are there any other countries you feel are particularly a threat to GB's top crews in the up and coming championships?
Well, Great Britain have been strong for the last, I suppose, 8 to 10 years now, and it seems to be getting stronger year by year. Certainly, Olympic results over the whole period that I was involved, and since I've retired, each games we've got slightly stronger than the ones before. I think that's going to be a big ask to do better than we did in London, out in Rio. New Zealand have been a pretty steady force for the last 7 or 8 years. Australia are back on the up. Germany had gone through a very big dip, but they seem to be coming back in strength. And then the other countries are sort of very good at sort of specialising in individual boats. I can't really see the status quo changing a huge amount. I think Germany are going to be very strong, and the usual suspects for the last few years are going to be the same candidates. I haven't seen so far coming out of London a huge amount of change from other countries making a big difference, but there's always sort of little bits and pieces. European Championships are always very interesting. It's a new concept in some ways, and I still think that they're tinkering with it, and I would still like to see improvements to it. Then it's my suggestion has always been is that have it where it is this year, but do it as an international regatta. So the worldwide crews can come and enter if they want. It's unlikely, and over the history since we've moved to the 3 World Cup races, there's very few further afield from Europe that come and compete. So treat it the same, but give the medals out for the international regatta, and then the first 3 from the Europeans and your European results, because it's important the ranking for some of the countries on their funding of keeping it that. So don't just isolate it to a European event, just expand it in some ways.
Yeah, because the recent World Cup in Australia, I think because it was so far and so early in the season, a lot of the European and American crews didn't bother because of the time, but they missed out on the points in the.
Yeah, and that's the gamble. Is that most of the European countries and Great Britain didn't go, so it's unlikely that they're going to win any of the World Cup events from that point of view. But the major element is how you do at the World Championships, how you do in the Olympic Games. World Cups are nice to compete at, but the way that our funding is done in the UK, it doesn't make any difference if we win the Europeans or the World Cup. It doesn't make any difference at all to our funding structure. It's how we do at the World Championships, the Olympics. And because there isn't the funding worldwide in rowing, is that it's a great idea to be able to go to Australia, Americas to have World Cup races. But in practice it doesn't work because there just isn't the funding from the bulk of the countries to be able to go. So it's good for that region. And for instance, Australia, New Zealand, America struggle to compete in the World Cup because they can't afford to come to all 3 World Cups when they're in Europe. I think the best idea for the sport in some ways is to have them further afield and have the World Cup events further apart. So where it's traditionally 3 weeks, is that the nature of the sport is whoever performs well at the first World Cup tends to perform well at the next one, and then is the major force at the major championships. There isn't a lot of change. So if you have bigger gaps, you've got more chance of boats being in different situations and more likely to get different results. And in some ways, the excitement, you want different results. When I was competing, I didn't want different results because I wanted to win. I wanted to be very consistent. But the reality is that for more interest, you don't want the same candidates who win the first World Cup to go on and win the World Championships or Olympic Games. It's too predictable in that way. So of widening them, so having an Australia one, having a America or a South America or process, I think is a good thing for our sport. But it comes down to funding, and there isn't the funding, so it's never going to happen.
So that geographic spread and a time spread, you think is healthy for the competition?
I think so. But the reality is the people in the sport, the managers, the coaches, are set in the routine of this is our programme, this is how we do it. In my early days, there were 3 or 4 international regattas that we used to go to. Some countries used to go to the similar ones. Lucerne was always the one that everyone came to. That was the sort of the nature of the game, but there were 2-week gaps. Then the World Cups came in and there were 3-week gaps, which was better because you have more training time. And our sport, it's an endurance muscle sport, so it's not about of really how you're feeling on the day, it's how much training you've done. And if you've only got 3 weeks from one race to the next, or less than 3 weeks from finish to start, is you've got no time to make any difference.
Great. And then on British rowing, how do you feel about it sort of in its totality? So the strength of the squad, the funding, the grassroots development and the management, I guess just sort of in a nutshell. There's obviously a huge spectrum in that, yeah. Do you think it's sort of in a good shape and it moving in sort of a good direction?
British rowing is in very good shape. I think one of the reasons that we're performing at the highest level is that consistency and quality of people involved. So from David Tanner at the top through to the national coaches, down to the chief coaches and also the individual coaches are more or less the same people over a number of years. And they all seem to be happy in the role that they're doing. There's no sort of power struggle between them of what's happening, which is good. When you've got good people doing good jobs, is that you're taking, and we seem to have some pretty good athletes around as well. In my day, I suppose that you had really 3 real standout world beaters, if they were trained and prepared in the right way, of Greg Searle, Matt Pinson and myself. Almost that we could have made anybody's top boat of whatever country. Now, we have very good people. We seem to have more people in depth, but the coaching system's bringing that out. It's in the early days, I would have said it was about the individual. Now I think it's more about the infrastructure and the way that it's managed. And I think we manage our athletes better than any other country. And I think that's why we're overall at the top. It'll be interesting to see what happens after Rio, where David Tanner may retire, Jürgen may retire. He always said he was going to retire 2 games ago, and he's still going. Paul Thompson will still.
There are other people who said that from time to time.
Yeah, no, that Paul Thompson may carry on, but there will be. Looks like there will be a change, and Manchester United were pretty successful under one manager for a long period of time. They made a change, and they're still a force to be reckoned with, but weren't quite the same force as they would be. So it'll be an interesting time.